Hello guys. Okay, so this video we are going to start the mathematical literacy paper 2, right, from November of 2019. What's important here is remember that paper 2 is our applications paper, right, which means that these questions are often a little bit more difficult than paper 1, because paper one is more basic skills paper, right? This one is saying, okay, you've proven your basic skills in paper 1. Let's test these skills and see how you can apply them, okay? So you would expect questions that are much higher sort of mark allocation for this paper than necessary for paper 1, okay? So before we jump in, I just want to give you a bit of a lowdown of how I'm going to do this. I'm going to do each individual sub-question separately so that you can navigate easily and quickly to the question that is most useful to you. Importantly, there's an addendum, right? Here's the addendum, wunderbar. So we're going to use the addendum for some of our questions. And what's also important here is they've said you can round off all final answers. Don't round it off before you have a final answer. It says indicate units of measurement, right? What that means is if there is a measurement, put it in. Tell us what it refers to. Don't just put 10 when it's supposed to say 10 Rand. Tell us what you're actually talking about. Okay, be as specific as possible. Try to make it as easy as possible for the marker to give you marks. Okay, so that's just my little shindig before we go. Okay, so let's just jump into question 1.1. Remember, each question needs to be started on a new page, right? Started on a new page. And I'm not going to do that while we do this because I don't want to waste paper. But in your final exam, they split out your questions for different people to mark, and that's why it needs to be on separate pages. Okay, so let's jump into question 1 and see what they want from us. It says an annual agricultural show, I was going to say an alcohol show, goodness, an annual agricultural show is held in Nampo Park in the Free State in May. Farmers and other interested people visit the show to show the latest developments, they visit the show to see the latest developments in farming. So if Annex A shows the route map to Nampo Park. Okay, so it's important when they say things like that, we go to our addendum, we find what we're talking about. Lovely, Nampo Park, there we go. Okay, so what's important is sometimes I always use highlighters when it comes to these sort of things to always make sure I know what is going on. There's Nampo, okay, that's important. And it says, use the annexure to answer the questions that follow. Okay, so what's important here is you don't always have to understand the map, right? The actual questions will help you understand it better. So I always sort of go to the questions before I spend extensive time on the map and kind of figure it out from there, okay? So it says, name the 2 towns closest to Nampo Park, okay? So what's important when we are reading a map is 1, we realize where north is. In this case, north is kind of like upwards. It's a little bit squiff, but it's kind of upwards. And we read the legend or the key. So it says a town is this little circle, right? So these are all towns. The little square is a bigger town or city. So we've been asked for towns. So we mustn't put in any towns or cities, right? It just wants a town, okay? And then what's important as well is this little asterisk tells us the kilometers to Nampo Park, okay? So over here, by I think say Kroonstad, apologies if I don't pronounce these things correctly. Kroonstad, right, is 80 kilometers. So from Kroonstad to Nampo Park, it is 80 kilometers, right? That's how long it's going to take you to get there. From Bloemfontein, it is 220 kilometers to get from Bloemfontein to Nampo, okay? So that's just what it's telling us there. But let's go and answer this question first. Okay, so it says name the 2 towns closest to Nampo Park. Okay, so if there's Nampo, I would say Viljoenskroon, I think that's how you say it, and Bothaville are closest to Nampo. You might want to say Klerksdorp, right? But Klerksdorp is a city. It ain't a town, right? And it's important to answer the question that we have been asked, not answer the question that we would like to answer. Okay, so it's Bothaville and Viljoenskroon. I think that is how you say it. I really need to work on my pronunciation. Okay, question 1.1.1. Remember, always reference your questions as accurately as possible. The 2 towns are Bothaville and Viljoenskroon. So we have answered that question. Let's just check we've answered it correctly. We've said 2, closest to Nampo Park. Great. Let's move on to 1.1.2. I just want to make sure you can actually see what I'm writing here, because it's not helpful if you can't. So give the 2 general compass directions that a visitor must use to travel by car from OR Tambo Airport, sure, my pronunciation, via Klerksdorp to reach Nampo Park. So it's saying, okay, they're at OR Tambo, they need to go to Nampo, and they need to go via Klerksdorp to get there. So let's just draw a little map sort of journey for them. So they're going sort of from Joburg to Potchefstroom, then to Klerksdorp, and then they're going to head down to Nampo. Okay, so what's important is this compass, right? So the opposite of north is south, right? And then we put in never eat silkworms. That's how I remember. It's always clockwise, okay? So we know that if he's over here and he's sort of heading down that way, right, it's going to be southwest. That's what I'm sort of seeing. It's going to be southwest, and once he gets to Klerksdorp, it's going to be south. Do you agree with me? Right? I keep asking whether you agree with me, but you can't answer, but I hope you do agree with me. Okay, 1.1.2. Okay, let's just check we've answered it correctly. It says, give the 2 general compass directions that a visitor must use to travel from OR Tambo Airport via Klerksdorp to reach Nampo Park. Okay, so we're going to say southwest and south. Okay, so it's southwest when he's going from ORT to Klerksdorp. Once he's at Klerksdorp, it's south to Nampo. Okay, so it's 4 marks there, so you'll get 2 marks for each of these, right? You'll get 2 marks for southwest and 2 marks for south. Okay, so it's worth spending a little bit of time making sure you understand that. I would definitely advise drawing in the route, right? It really helps with understanding, okay? Now, let's go to 1.1.3, right? So it says here, okay, the distance from Bloemfontein to Welkom, I hope I said that correctly, is 152 kilometers. And the distance from Bloemfontein to Bultfontein is 100 kilometers. Okay, so determine with calculations, the route the organizers used to indicate the distance from Bloemfontein to Nampo. Now, there are a lot of moving pieces in this question, but let's just try figure out what is being said. Okay, I'm going to get us another highlighter so that we can figure this one out. Okay, so we have Bloemfontein down here, right? And Bloemfontein, it says, is a 220 kilometers from Nampo. So this route here, well, we don't know, right? It could be either of these routes are 220. So that's what we're trying to see. Is it this one? Is it 1? Or is it 2? So did the organizers, when they measured this 220, did they do the 220 via Welkom to get to Nampo, or by Bultfontein? Okay, so let's use the information that we have. So it says the distance from Bloemfontein to Welkom is 152. So this is 152 kilometers, just this bit here. Okay, that's 152. Then it says the distance from Bloemfontein to Bultfontein is 100 kilometers. Okay, so that's 100 kilometers. So that's 152, and that is 100. Okay, so we know that the organizers said, right, that from Bloem to Nampo, it's 220, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how many kilometers is it from Bloem to Nampo via Welkom, and how many kilometers it is from Bloem via Bultfontein to Nampo. Okay, so Bloem via Welkom, there's writing, to Nampo. So that's the route. Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out, right? So we know that Bloem to Welkom is 152. We got given that. And then Welkom to Nampo is this 75. Remember, each of the distances under each of these different towns or cities indicates a distance to Nampo, right? So it's 152 from Bloemfontein to Welkom, but then from Welkom to Nampo, it is 75. So we're going to add 75, and let's see what that equals. 152 plus 75. So that is 227 kilometers, right? So we're already thinking that the distance, this 220 distance that the organizers gave to everyone who was going to come from Bloem, right, is probably not via Welkom, right? Because 227 is not the same as 220, right? So let's see how many kilometers it would have taken, right, to go from Bloem to Bultfontein to Nampo. Okay, that's what we need to find out. So from Bloem to Bultfontein, it's 100 kilometers. We were given that in the question, right? It says over there, from Bloem to Bultfontein, 100 kilometers. Okay, then Bultfontein to Nampo is 120 kilometers, right? And if we put that into our calculator, it is 220 kilometers, which is what the organizers told people would be the distance from Bloem to Nampo. So we know that the organizers, right, did the Bultfontein route. Okay, and that is important. Okay, so basically what we did here is we said, what is the distance of the two different routes, and which of the distances that we calculated is in line with the distance that was given by the organizers. Okay, so it's a little bit of a tricky question because they're really testing whether you understand, right, how to read a map, but it actually is okay as long as we break it down. Okay, just want to make sure that you can see what I'm writing. Okay, so let's go on to the last question of this question. Now it's 6 marks. Sometimes when we see these 6 marks questions, we're almost like, well, I don't even want to try because I don't know what's going on. But let's actually just read it and see what we can do. Okay, it says Alfred departs from Nampo Park at 6:45 and travels to Sasselberg at an average speed of 88 kilometers an hour. He calls his wife to inform her that he will arrive in Sasselberg at 8 p.m. Okay, so verify with calculations whether his timing is correct. So basically, did he lie to his wife or not? Is he going to be met with a little fight when he gets home for lying? Who knows? That's basically what we're trying to figure out here. Okay, so let's see what is the actual time he's going to arrive, right? Let's see if he's good at estimating or if he's a little bit off. Okay, so let's first look, right? Let's first look at the distance from Nampo to Sasselberg. Okay, so what's important is remember the distance that they put underneath each of these towns or cities is the distance, right? Kilometers to Nampo. So kilometers here. So we know from Sasselberg, right? From Sasselberg to Nampo, right? And I'm just going to put a two-way arrow there because it's 150 kilometers either way, right? It's 150 kilometers. So that is actually how far he has to travel to get from Nampo, where he currently is, to Sasselberg, where he lives, right? And where his wife is. Okay. So we know that's how far he has to travel. We know that he travels at 88 kilometers per hour. Okay. That's important, right? 88 kilometers per hour. And he leaves Nampo, right? He leaves Nampo, it says over there, at 18:45, which is 6:45, right, in the evening. And he says he'll be home, he'll be at Sasselberg, right, at 20:00. So 20:00 is the same as 8 p.m., right? This is 6:45 p.m., and this is the same as 8 p.m., right? Different ways of writing the time. Okay, so he says that it's going to take him 1 hour and 15 minutes, right? Do you see that? 1 hour and 15 minutes for him to get home. But we need to test whether he's right or whether he's wrong. Okay, so now you could be thinking like, I'm going to give up on this one, Margs, and just go like to the next question. But we're not going to give up. We are not quitters. We're going to give it a go. Okay, so let's just try figure out what is going on here. So what's important is the speed that he travels. Okay, so you see here that it says, they've given us this nice little formula, which is distance equals speed times time. Okay, speed times time. Okay, so let's figure out, right, the distance that he needs to travel. We've done that, 150 kilometers. The speed, right, we've got the 88. So we just need to figure out the time. Okay, so what we're going to do is I want us, right, to take this 88 kilometers per hour and do it in something with minutes, right? Because we know that it's probably not going to be exact hours that it's going to take him to get to his home in Sasselberg. So let's just figure out what his speed is per minute. So we know that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, right? So we can say it's actually 88 kilometers in 60 minutes. Do you agree with me, right? 88 kilometers in 60 minutes. So let's convert that into a certain amount per minute, okay? So now, if we want to get from 60 to 1 minute, we have to divide it by 60. But, right, this is a ratio. It's actually a ratio. If we divide this by 60, we have to divide the 88 by 60. Right? We can't do to one aspect of the number what we don't do to the other, right? Of a ratio. This is a ratio. Effectively, it's saying this, right? It's saying 88 kilometers, 1 hour. So we're saying 88 kilometers, 60 minutes. Okay. So what we now want this to look like is 1 min. So I'm dividing by 60 on that side. So I'm going to divide by 60 on this side. Okay, so let's divide 88 by 60. Okay, so it is 1.46666 kilometers. Sorry, this is distance, right? So it's saying in 1 minute, he travels 1.466 kilometers, right? You don't have to write it all out. You can just sort of do that. Just make sure you still have it in your calculator, okay? So it's saying this, in 1 minute, he travels this far, okay? And I'm going to put it over here, okay? So now we know that he has to travel 150 kilometers, right? So because we know what he needs to travel, we can then figure out what it is in minutes, right? So we can say, okay, Alfred needs to travel 150 kilometers, okay? But if I divide this by 1.466, it'll give me the number of minutes that he needs in order to travel this 150 kilometers, right? So that's how far he has to travel, and this is how much he can travel in 1 minute. So we want to know the number of minutes it's going to take him to travel 150, okay? So I'm just going to say 150 divided by my answer. And my answer is 102.2727 minutes. Okay, so this is all in minutes, and now we're like, okay, but then how does that actually translate into time? Like, how is that working, Marks? You're confusing me. But let's just quickly go back to what we did. We said, okay, we found his speed. We got his speed per minute. Okay, that's what we did over there. Then we said, okay, now we know how far he has to travel. Okay, that's how many kilometers he has to travel. And this is how many kilometers he travels in a minute. So this answer here is, right, the time it takes for him to travel 150 kilometers. Okay, so let's divide this by 60, right, in order to get into hours. Alternatively, what we could do is we could say, okay, how many minutes, right? How many minutes, right, are there between, right, 18:45 and 8 o'clock, right? So we're saying how many minutes are there between those two times, the time that he left and the time that he says he'll be home. So if we do that, we don't have to do it in our calculator. We can actually do it in our head, right? We know that there's 60 minutes in an hour, right? So from 7 to 8, there is 60 minutes. But then from 6:45 to 7, there are 15 minutes, right? So he says that he will be home in 75 minutes. That's what he said. He said he'd be home in 75 minutes, right? That's what he allocated to himself. But we can see from this that he is not going to be home in 75 minutes. He's going to be home in 102.222 minutes, okay? So we know that, right? And I'm just going to, I know I said I wasn't going to waste paper, but I also don't want to lose some of my explanation here. So we're going to, right, say that it will take him 102.2727 minutes to get home, right? But he said he'd be home in 75, right? So he won't be home in 75, right? So he won't be home at 8 p.m. He won't be home at 8 p.m. But let's actually figure out what time he will be home, right? So if we say 102.2727 minus 75, so the time he'll actually be home, subtract the time that he actually said, right? This is the time he will be home minus the time that he said he would take to get home, right? So if we say 102 minus 75, he'll actually arrive home at 27 minutes later, right? Then he said that he'd be home. He said he'd be home in 75. He'll actually be home in 102. So he'll be home 27 minutes later than 8 p.m. So he will be home at 8:27 p.m. Okay, so let's just go over that one more time because I know we did a lot of work there, and let's just make sure we understand. So he left Nampo at 6:45 in the evening and said he'd be home at 8 to his wife. He's traveling at 88 kilometers per hour, and he has to travel 150 kilometers. So we said, let's start with the speed. Okay, the speed is 88 kilometers per hour. We converted that into minutes, right? An hour equals 60 minutes. Then we converted that into a distance per minute. Okay, then we said, if he has to travel 150 kilometers, let's divide it by the distance that he travels in a minute to understand how many minutes it should take him to get home. And we got that answer. Okay. Then we said, okay, we know that's how long it will take him to get home. But how long did he say he would take to get home? And we calculated that that was 75 minutes. So we say it will take him 102 minutes to get home. But he said he'd be home in 75. So he won't be home at 8, right? He'll be home later than that. So we said, what is the difference between the time he will get home and the time he said he'd be home? So we said the amount we calculated minus the amount he said, right? And we see that he'll be home 27 minutes later than he said he would be. So he will be home at 8:27. So you can put all these decimal places in there if you want, but I sort of just took them out and rounded it off, right? Because you can just say this is equivalent to 27 minutes. Okay, so he'll be home at 8:27, which is 27 minutes later than he said he'd be home to his wife. Okay, if you need to go over that, just replay the video and go over it. It's just we have to do things step by step, right? We started with the ratio. We found out how long it would take him. We compared it to what he said, how long it would take him. Then we said, okay, he was wrong. What time will he actually be home? 8:27. Okay, so just go over that a couple of times and you will figure it out. Okay, cool. That is the end of this section. We will now move on to the second question of question 1. I hope that was helpful.